Chapter 5. Ember woke to the taste of copper in her mouth and the sound of chanting in a language that made her skin crawl. Her head throbbed as consciousness returned in fragments, the memory of returning from the hunt victorious, the celebration in the Great Hall, the toast Morgana had insisted she share to honor her remarkable performance in the forest. She should have known better than to drink anything the witch offered, but exhaustion and the euphoria of discovering her Stormcaller abilities had made her careless. Now she was paying for that mistake. The chamber where she'd awakened was carved from black stone, lit by torches that burned with an unnatural blue flame. Ancient symbols covered every surface, pulsing with malevolent energy that made her newly awakened magical senses recoil in horror. She was bound to a stone altar by chains that felt cold against her skin, not just physically cold, but magically cold, designed to suppress her powers. "Ah, you're awake. Excellent." Morgana emerged from the shadows, no longer bothering with her maternal facade. Gone was the elegant dress and carefully arranged silver hair. Instead, she wore flowing black robes that seemed to absorb light, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders, shot through with streaks of silver that looked more like scars than age. Her eyes, which had always been sharp, now glowed with an inner fire that spoke of magic and madness. "Let me go," Ember said, testing her bonds. The chains held firm, and worse, they seemed to drain her strength with every movement. "I'm afraid that's not possible, my dear. You see, you're far too valuable to simply release." Morgana moved to an ornate table covered with ritual implements, knives, bowls, crystals that pulsed with dark energy. "Though I must say, your little display in the forest was quite impressive. I'd suspected you were Stormcaller bloodline, but seeing you actually call lightning." She sighed with what sounded like genuine pleasure. "It was magnificent. How did you know about my heritage?" "Oh, I've known for quite some time. Since before you were born, actually." Morgana selected a curved silver blade from the table, testing its edge with her thumb. A drop of blood welled up, and she smiled as it fell onto the stone floor with a hiss. "You see, I knew your mother." Ember's heart stopped. "That's impossible. My mother died when I was 3. "Yes, she did. I killed her." The words hit Ember like physical blows. "What?" Seraphina Stormwind was the last known Stormcaller, the final heir to a bloodline of incredible power. Morgana began to pace around the altar, her movements predatory and hypnotic. "I offered her everything: wealth, position, the chance to rule alongside me as we reshaped the supernatural world. All she had to do was serve. And she refused. She refused." Morgana's expression darkened with remembered fury. She chose instead to hide among humans, to dilute her bloodline by mating with a common werewolf, to waste her gifts on obscurity and motherhood. Such a tragic waste of potential. Ember struggled against her bonds, fury giving her strength despite the draining effects of the chains. "You murdered my mother because she wouldn't be your slave. I eliminated a threat to my plans. There's a difference." Morgana stopped pacing, fixing Ember with a stare that felt like ice. "But she left me a gift before she died, you. A daughter with even more potential than she possessed, raised in ignorance of her true nature, perfect for molding into what I need. I'll never serve you. Never." "Oh, but you will." Morgana's smile was terrible to behold. "Because if you don't, everyone you care about will die. Starting with Kai." "Ember." Damon's voice suddenly exploded in her mind, stronger than it had ever been. "Thank God you're alive. Kai is going insane looking for you." "Where am I?" she asked desperately. "The old tower, beneath the manor. Morgana's been building this ritual chamber for years, warded against detection. But the wards are weakening now that she's actively using them." "What do you want from me?" Ember asked aloud, hoping to buy time while she communicated with Damon. "Simple. You're going to break the curse on my dear nephew Damon, just as we planned. But with one small modification." Morgana moved back to her table of implements, selecting several items with careful precision. "Instead of freeing him, you're going to transfer the curse to Kai." "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. Oh yes, it's quite possible with the right ritual modifications. Damon will be restored to human form and take his rightful place as Alpha King, under my guidance, of course. And Kai will spend the rest of his very short life as a beast, unable to interfere with my plans. She's completely insane. Damon's mental voice was filled with horror. Ember, you can't do this. Even if she threatens Kai. I won't, Ember replied silently. But I need to get out of these chains first. The beauty of this plan, Morgana continued, oblivious to the telepathic conversation happening around her, is that everyone will believe it was an accident. A well-meaning half-blood, overwhelmed by magic she doesn't understand, making a tragic mistake during a delicate ritual. So very sad. Why? Ember asked. Why go to all this trouble? You already have influence over Kai. You've been pulling his strings for years. Influence, yes. But not control. Not complete obedience. Morgana's eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. Kai has been resistant to certain suggestions lately. Ever since you arrived, actually. He's been questioning things he never questioned before, making decisions without consulting me. You've been a very bad influence on him. She's afraid, Damon observed. You've been teaching Kai to think for himself, and it's threatening her power. But Damon, Morgana continued, will be properly grateful for his restoration. And more importantly, he'll be bound to me by the very magic that frees him. A willing puppet is useful, but a magically compelled one is infinitely more reliable. You're talking about enslaving your own nephew. I'm talking about bringing order to chaos, purpose to waste. Morgana set down her implements and moved to face Ember directly. The supernatural world is fractured, divided, weak. Humans encroach on our territories while we squabble among ourselves like children. But with a Stormcaller's power channeled properly, we could unite all the packs under one rule. We could reclaim our rightful dominance over this world. Megalomaniac, Damon commented dryly. She's been planning this for decades. And if I refuse? Then Kai dies tonight. Slowly and painfully, while you watch. Morgana's smile was pure malice. I've already sent word to my allies in the pack. They believe they're acting on Kai's orders, leading him into what they think is a rescue mission. In reality, they're delivering him to a trap that will leave him at my mercy. Terror clawed at Ember's chest. When? Soon. Very soon. Morgana began lighting additional candles around the chamber, their flames casting dancing shadows on the carved walls. The ritual must be performed at the stroke of midnight, when the magical barriers are weakest. Which gives us just enough time for you to fully understand what you're dealing with. She moved to a section of wall covered in particularly intricate carvings and pressed her palm against a specific symbol. The stone slid aside, revealing a hidden alcove that made Ember's blood turn to ice. Inside were bones. Human bones, arranged with ritualistic precision around a blackened skull that seemed to absorb light. Your mother's remains, Morgana said casually. I've been saving them for just such an occasion. Stormcaller bones hold tremendous magical resonance, you see. They'll help focus your power during the ritual. The sight of her mother's defiled remains broke something inside Ember. Rage flooded through her system, hot and wild and absolutely devastating. The chains binding her began to glow with heat as her Stormcaller abilities fought against the magical suppression. You sick, twisted. Now. No need for dramatics. Morgana closed the alcove, but the image remained burned into Ember's mind. Your mother's sacrifice will help ensure the ritual's success. She'll finally serve her purpose, even in death. Ember, you need to stay calm, Damon warned urgently. Your emotions are feeding the magical field around you. If you lose control. I can't. She desecrated my mother's body. She's planning to. I know. But if you burn out fighting the chains, you won't be able to help anyone. Focus on conserving your strength. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from somewhere above. Morgana's head snapped up, her expression shifting from confident to alert. Ah, right on schedule. Your rescuer approaches. It's Kai, Damon confirmed. He's found the entrance to the tunnels. But Ember, he's walking into a trap. Morgana has at least a dozen wolves waiting in the upper chambers. Fear for Kai overrode Ember's concern for her own situation. Don't hurt him. Please. I'll do whatever you want, just don't hurt him. Oh, my dear girl. It's far too late for bargaining. Morgana moved to the chamber's entrance, her voice carrying an anticipation that made Ember's skin crawl. But don't worry. You'll have a front row seat for his capture. The next few minutes passed in a nightmare of muffled sounds from above, shouting, fighting, the unmistakable sounds of battle. Ember strained against her chains until her wrists bled, but the magical bindings held firm. Then, suddenly, the sound stopped. Morgana returned to the chamber, levitating an unconscious Kai behind her with casual magical ease. He was battered and bleeding, his clothes torn from the fight, but he was alive. The relief Ember felt was so intense it made her dizzy. Kai, she called out, but he didn't respond. Don't worry, he's merely unconscious. I need him alive and aware for what comes next. Morgana deposited Kai's body on a second stone slab that rose from the floor at her gesture. More chains snaked out to bind him in place. Though I must say, he put up quite a fight. Killed 3 of my allies before the stunning spell took effect. He's not unconscious, Damon's voice was tight with worry. He's been drugged with something that's suppressing his healing abilities. The wounds he took in the fight, they're not closing. As if summoned by Damon's observation, Kai's eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy with pain and whatever Morgana had used to drug him, but they immediately focused on Ember with laser intensity. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice rough but determined. I'm fine. But Kai, you need to know. How touching, Morgana interrupted. The great romance continues even in captivity. But I'm afraid this reunion will be brief. She moved to stand between the 2 stone slabs, raising her hands as magical energy began to build around her. The ritual implements on her table glowed with increasing brightness. You see, Kai, dear nephew, you've become a problem. Your refusal to follow my guidance, your unfortunate attachment to this half-blood, your growing independence, it's all very inconvenient. Her voice took on the cadence of a lecture. So I've decided to solve multiple problems at once. What are you talking about? Kai struggled against his bonds, but the chains held firm. Miss Thornfield is going to perform a little magic for us. She's going to break Damon's curse and transfer it to you instead. 1 brother freed, 1 brother enslaved. Quite poetic, don't you think? Kai's expression shifted from confusion to horror as the full implications hit him. Ember would never. Oh, but she will. Because if she doesn't, I'll kill you slowly while she watches. And then I'll kill everyone else she cares about in this pack, one by one, until she agrees to cooperate. Don't listen to her, Damon urged. Even if she kills me, don't do this. It won't end with just transferring the curse. But Ember was staring at Kai, seeing the pain in his eyes, the blood that continued to seep from his wounds because his healing was being suppressed. She couldn't lose him. Not now, not when she'd just discovered what he meant to her. There is another option, Morgana continued, as if reading her thoughts. You could choose to serve me willingly. Bind yourself to my service with the old oaths, and I'll spare both brothers. You'll be my weapon, my source of power, but they'll live. Ember, no, Kai said urgently. Whatever she's offering, don't trust her. But Morgana wasn't finished. Of course, I should mention that your new boyfriend hasn't been entirely honest with you. Have you told her yet, Kai? About what you discovered during your research into her background? Ember felt ice form in her stomach. What research? Kai's expression shifted, guilt replacing the urgency in his eyes. Ember, I can explain. He's been investigating you since the night you rode Nightfall, Morgana said with obvious pleasure. Digging into your family history, your mother's death, your magical heritage. He's known about your Stormcaller bloodline for days. The betrayal hit Ember like a physical blow. You knew? You knew what I was and you didn't tell me? I suspected, but I wasn't certain. And I was trying to protect you. Protect me? By lying to me? By investigating me like I was some kind of threat? You are a threat, Morgana interjected smoothly. The most dangerous kind, a stormcaller who doesn't know her own power. Did you really think Kai's interest in you was romantic? He's been using you, dear girl. Learning about your abilities so he could find a way to control them. That's not true, Kai said desperately. Ember, you have to believe me. Yes, I researched your background, but only because I was trying to understand what was happening between us. The attraction, the connection, I thought it might be magical in nature. And when you realized it was? Ember's voice was deadly quiet. When I realized you were Stormcaller bloodline, I was terrified. Kai's honesty was brutal and complete. Not of you, but of what it meant. Stormcallers are supposed to be myths, legends. The idea that I was falling in love with someone who could level mountains with her emotions. So you decided to keep me in the dark about my own heritage. I decided to research more before telling you anything that might not be true. I was trying to be responsible. You were trying to control me, just like she said. Ember turned away from him, her heart breaking. You knew what I was, and you let me think I was going crazy when the magic started manifesting. Ember, listen to me, Damon's voice cut through her anguish. I can feel Kai's emotions through our blood bond. He's telling the truth about his feelings for you. The research, the secrecy, it was fear, not manipulation. But the damage was done. The trust between them, so fragile and new, lay shattered like glass on the stone floor. Magnificent, Morgana breathed, magical energy swirling around her like a visible wind. Nothing quite like a betrayal between lovers to fuel a good curse. The emotional resonance will make the transfer so much more powerful. She raised her hands, and the ritual began in earnest. The candles flared higher, the carved symbols began to glow, and power filled the air like electricity before a storm. Last chance, my dear, Morgana called over the rising magical wind. Serve me willingly, or watch your beloved become a beast. Ember looked at Kai, seeing the anguish in his eyes, the love that even his betrayal couldn't diminish. Then she looked at the altar where her mother's bones lay desecrated, at the witch who had destroyed her family and was now trying to destroy everything she cared about. Stormcaller power rose within her like a tide. I have a third option, she said, her voice carrying over the magical chaos. And what would that be? Ember smiled, and lightning danced in her eyes. I burn this whole place down. The chains binding her hands began to glow white-hot as her power surged beyond anything she'd experienced in the forest. But before she could break free, the chamber doors burst open. A dozen of Morgana's corrupted pack members poured into the room, their eyes glowing with unnatural fervor. They moved with military precision, surrounding the altar and leveling crossbows at both Ember and Kai. Iron bolts, Morgana explained conversationally. Quite effective against both werewolf healing and magical shields. I do so hate to be interrupted during delicate work. Now would be a good time for a rescue, Damon observed urgently. As if summoned by his words, another figure appeared in the doorway. Lydia Stormwind stepped into the chamber, her expression coldly furious as she surveyed the scene. Lady Morgana, she said formally. I'm afraid I can't allow this to continue. Lydia? What are you doing here? My job. Protecting my Alpha King. Lydia's gaze shifted to Kai, then to Ember. Both of them, as it turns out. Both of them? What are you talking about? You really should have done more research before attempting this ritual, Lydia said, moving into the chamber with deadly grace. Ember Thornfield isn't just Stormcaller bloodline. She's the daughter of Seraphina Stormwind, which makes her my cousin. And under pack law, that makes her family. The revelation hit Ember like another lightning bolt. You're related to my mother? Second cousins. Your mother and my father were first cousins. Lydia's expression softened slightly as she looked at Ember. I've been watching over you from a distance for years, waiting for your powers to manifest. I couldn't interfere directly without exposing you to danger, but I could ensure you stayed safe. How very touching, Morgana snarled. But it changes nothing. My followers outnumber you 12 to 1. Actually, Lydia smiled, and it was a predator's expression. It's more like 12 to 20. The sounds of battle erupted from the tunnels outside as Lydia's backup arrived. But in the chaos of the moment, one of Morgana's followers panicked and fired his crossbow. The iron bolt was aimed at Ember's heart. Kai saw it coming and did the only thing he could do. He threw himself sideways, straining against his chains until something snapped, and took the bolt meant for her. The iron tip punched through his chest with a wet, terrible sound. Kai! Ember's scream of anguish released every ounce of Stormcaller power she'd been holding back. The chains binding her shattered like glass. Lightning erupted from her hands, striking down 3 of Morgana's followers instantly. The magical wind in the chamber became a hurricane, and thunder shook the very foundations of the manor. But none of it mattered. Kai lay dying on the stone slab, his blood pooling beneath him, the iron bolt protruding from his chest like an accusation. The iron is preventing his healing, Damon's voice was desperate. If it stays in much longer, he'll die. Ember reached Kai's side just as his eyes fluttered closed. His breathing was labored, growing shallower with each passing second.
She turned back to the assembled council. I move to officially recognize Ember Thornfield's transformation as legal under the Covenant of the First Packs, and to acknowledge her status as Luna of the Silver Ridge Pack. Seconded, said Alpha King Theodore immediately. Thirded, added another voice, then another. Within moments, the motion had unanimous support, even Alpha Marcus grudgingly voted in favor. By the authority of the Council of Alphas, Selene announced formally, Ember Thornfield is hereby recognized as Luna and Storm Alpha of the Silver Ridge Pack, with all rights and responsibilities pertaining to that position. The assembled pack members erupted in cheers, but Ember barely heard them. She was overwhelmed by a sense of completion, of finally belonging somewhere completely and without reservation. You did it, Kai told her through their bond, his mental voice bright with pride and love. You've made them see what I saw from the beginning, that you're extraordinary. We did it, she corrected. All of us, together. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with wolves from Silver Ridge and visiting territories mingling in ways that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. Political barriers seemed to dissolve in the face of shared recognition that the supernatural world was changing, and those who adapted would thrive while those who resisted would fall behind. Ember found herself swept from conversation to conversation, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about her transformation. Many of the visiting alphas wanted to know more about the void threat, and several mentioned strange occurrences in their own territories that now seemed potentially connected. But eventually, she managed to slip away from the crowds, seeking a few moments of quiet in the manor's garden. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of late-blooming flowers, and she could hear the distant sounds of continued celebration. She wasn't alone for long. Penny for your thoughts? Kai said, settling beside her on the stone bench where she'd been watching the stars. Just processing everything that's happened. A month ago, I was nobody. Tonight, I'm officially recognized as one of the most powerful beings in the supernatural world. She leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. It's a lot to take in. Any regrets? None. Well, maybe one. What's that? I wish my mother could have seen this. Could have known that her sacrifice wasn't in vain, that her daughter found a way to be strong without being corrupted. She did see it, a familiar mental voice said softly. Damon approached through the garden, his expression gentle. In the spirit realm, during the final battle. She was there, Ember. She saw everything, and she was proud. How can you be sure? Because she told me. Just before we returned to the physical realm, she spoke to me directly. She said. Damon paused, searching for the exact words. She said that you had found what she never could, the balance between power and love, between strength and compassion. She said you were everything she had hoped you would become. Tears sprang to Ember's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than grief. To know that Serafina had seen her daughter's triumph, had been proud of the choices Ember made. "Thank you," she whispered, "for telling me that." "There's something else," Damon continued, his expression growing thoughtful. "Something I've been sensing through our telepathic connection, but wasn't sure about until tonight." "What kind of something?" Instead of answering directly, Damon looked at Kai. "Have you noticed anything different about Ember lately? Besides the obvious transformation?" Kai frowned, considering. "She's been more tired than usual. More emotional. Her scent has been—" He stopped, his eyes widening as understanding dawned. "Her scent has been changing." "Changing how?" Ember asked, though a part of her was beginning to suspect what they were getting at. "Richer. Sweeter. More." Kai's voice trailed off as he stared at her with wonder. "Ember, when was your last heat cycle?" She mentally calculated, then felt her breath catch. 6 weeks ago. But I've been under so much stress, and with all the magical changes." She looked back and forth between the two brothers. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying," Damon's mental voice was warm with delight, "that my telepathic connection to you is picking up more than just your thoughts and emotions. There's another presence there, small but growing stronger. Actually, 2 presences." "2?" Ember's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Twins," Kai breathed, his hand moving instinctively to rest on her still flat stomach. "Stormcaller twins." The knowledge hit her like lightning, joyful, terrifying, overwhelming lightning. She was pregnant. With Kai's children. Children who would inherit both Stormcaller abilities and Alpha bloodline magic. "This is why," she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. "This is why Nightfall recognized me that first night. Why the connection was so strong, so immediate." "What do you mean?" Kai asked. "Stormcallers have always been guardians of the future, protectors of what's to come. Nightfall," Damon sensed that I was carrying the next generation. That's why he submitted to me, why the curse couldn't completely hold him once I arrived." She looked at Damon with wonder. "You were waiting for them, weren't you? Not just for me, but for the children who would bridge both worlds." Damon smiled, his expression filled with the same wonder she felt. "I thought I was just waiting for someone who could see through Morgana's deceptions. But you're right, there was something more, something deeper drawing me to hope even in my darkest moments. The knowledge that the future was coming, that change was inevitable." Kai pulled her closer, his emotions flooding through their bond in waves of joy and love and protective determination. "Our children," he said softly. "The first Storm Alpha cubs in history. They'll be powerful," Ember said, her hand covering his on her stomach. "Probably more powerful than any of us can imagine." "They'll also be loved," Kai replied firmly. "Loved and protected and taught to use their gifts wisely." "And they'll have the entire pack watching over them," Damon added. "Not to mention at least 12 other Alpha territories who now understand the importance of what you represent." "No pressure," Ember said with a laugh that was half joy, half panic. "We'll figure it out," Kai assured her. "Together. The same way we figured out everything else." As they sat in the garden, surrounded by the sounds of celebration and the promise of a future none of them could have imagined, Ember reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From outcast half-blood to Luna, from powerless to Storm Alpha, from alone to loved beyond measure. The wild horse had never been a test or a punishment. It had been a beginning, the first step on a path that led to family, to purpose, to a love that could transform not just her life but the entire supernatural world. "Speaking of the future," Damon said with mental laughter, "you might want to consider expanding the matter. Something tells me these children are going to need a lot of space to practice their abilities safely." "And soundproofing," Kai added. "Lots and lots of soundproofing." Ember laughed, imagining tiny storms and miniature lightning bolts crackling through the halls of Ravencrest Manor. The image should have been terrifying. Instead, it filled her with anticipation for all the chaos and joy and love that lay ahead. "I can't wait to meet them," she said softly. "Neither can I," Kai agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Our wild hearts unleashed on the world." As if in response to his words, a gentle breeze stirred the garden, carrying with it the promise of storms and sunshine, of changes yet to come, of a love strong enough to weather any challenge the future might bring. Ember closed her eyes and let herself dream of two small children with their father's steel-gray eyes and their mother's storm-touched power, growing up surrounded by pack and family and the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged. The future was coming, and it was going to be extraordinary. Epilogue. 6 months later. Ember stood at the edge of the sacred grove, watching Kai and Damon work with a group of young wolves on advanced combat techniques. Her pregnancy was showing now, her belly round with the promise of the twins who seemed to grow stronger and more active every day. The past 6 months had brought changes beyond anything she could have imagined. 3 other packs had reported their own transformations. Alphas and strong wolves developing new abilities in response to supernatural threats. The Council of Alphas had established a new division specifically to study and support these evolving powers. Most importantly, the void had remained quiescent. Whether it was truly gone or simply biding its time remained to be seen, but for now, the supernatural world was at peace. "How are you feeling?" Kai asked through their bond, pausing in his instruction to check on her. "Like I'm carrying 2 storm systems," she replied with mental laughter. They'd been particularly active today. Maybe they're excited about their uncle's return. Ember smiled, watching as Damon demonstrated a complex fighting technique with fluid grace. His adjustment to freedom had been remarkable. He'd thrown himself into his role as first beta with enthusiasm, helping to train the next generation of Silver Ridge wolves while building relationships with other packs. He'd also been spending time with Alpha Queen Celine, who had extended her stay at Silver Ridge far longer than originally planned. The developing relationship between them was interesting to watch, 2 powerful wolves discovering that they shared more than just political goals. "Think he'll propose soon?" Ember asked. "I think he's working up the courage." Apparently, asking an Alpha Queen to mate bond is more complicated than normal relationship negotiations. A sudden sharp kick from one of the twins made Ember gasp and place both hands on her belly. "What's wrong?" Kai's concern flooded through their bond. "Nothing's wrong. They're just very enthusiastic today." But as she said it, Ember realized something was different. The twins' movements weren't just active, they were coordinated, as if they were responding to something she couldn't sense. She looked around the grove, using her Storm Alpha abilities to scan for any unusual magical signatures. Everything seemed normal: wolves training, birds singing, the ancient oak swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. Then she saw him. Nightfall stood at the edge of the tree line, no longer the magnificent but deadly stallion she'd first encountered, but Damon in his true form. He was watching the training session with obvious pride, but his attention kept shifting to her with an expression of wonder and anticipation. They can sense him, she realized. Even in the womb, they recognize their uncle. The thought filled her with awe and a little trepidation. If the twins were already demonstrating that level of magical sensitivity, their abilities were going to be unprecedented. "Good thing we decided to homeschool," Kai said, having followed her thoughts through their bond. "Good thing we have a whole pack to help raise them," she corrected. As if summoned by their conversation, Lydia appeared at her side. "How are our future Storm Alphas doing today?" "Active. Very, very active." Ember accepted her cousin's steadying hand as another coordinated kick nearly knocked her off balance. "I think they're going to be a handful." "The best ones always are," Lydia said with a smile. "Speaking of which, the nursery is finished. Would you like to see it?" The nursery had been a pack project, with every family contributing something: hand-carved furniture, protective wards, soft blankets imbued with calming magic. It was a tangible representation of how completely the pack had embraced their future Luna's children. "I'd love to," Ember said, then paused as she felt a familiar presence touch her mind. "Congratulations, daughter." Seraphina's voice was faint but unmistakably warm, speaking from whatever realm she now inhabited. Mother? I wanted you to know, the children you carry will be everything our bloodline was meant to produce. Powerful, yes, but also wise. Loving. They'll have the strength to protect others without being corrupted by that strength. How can you be sure? Because they're yours and Kai's. Because they're being raised by a pack that understands the difference between power and tyranny. Because love is already shaping them even before they're born. Tears sprang to Amber's eyes. I wish you could meet them. Who says I won't? The barrier between realms isn't as solid as most people think, especially for stormcallers. When the time is right, when they're old enough to understand, I'll find a way. The promise settled into Ember's heart like a blessing. Her children would know their grandmother's love, would understand the legacy they carried and the responsibility that came with their gifts. I love you, Mother. And I love you, my extraordinary daughter. Now go see your nursery. I believe you'll find it quite suitable for two little stormcallers. As Seraphina's presence faded, Ember felt the twins settle in her womb, as if they too had been comforted by their grandmother's voice. Ready? Lydia asked, having waited patiently through the spiritual conversation. Ready, Ember confirmed. The nursery was perfect, spacious enough for two active children, with windows that could be magically sealed during their inevitable first storms, and toys that could withstand supernatural tantrums. But what touched her most were the personal details: a mobile crafted from crystals that would sing lullabies, a rocking chair that had belonged to Kai's mother, and two tiny cribs carved with protective runes by every member of the pack. It's beautiful, she told Kai through their bond. Wait until you see what Damon contributed. In the corner of the room sat a magnificent rocking horse, carved from oak and detailed with such artistry that it seemed almost alive. A plaque at its base read, "For the next generation of wild hearts, from Uncle Damon." He made it himself, Kai explained. Spent weeks getting every detail perfect. The gesture moved her beyond words. This was family, not just the biological bonds between her, Kai, and the twins, but the chosen family of the pack, the connections forged through love and loyalty and shared purpose. A sudden commotion from outside interrupted her emotional moment. Shouts of alarm, followed by the sound of wolves shifting to their battle forms. What's happening? She asked Kai urgently. Unknown. I'm checking now. Through their bond, she felt him reaching out with his alpha senses, scanning the territory for threats. What he found made his mental voice tight with concern. There's something in the forest. Something big, moving toward the manor. It doesn't feel hostile, but it's powerful enough to make every wolf in the pack nervous. Ember moved to the nursery window, looking out toward the forest where she could see shapes moving between the trees. Large shapes, moving with purpose and intelligence. Then she gasped. Horses. Magnificent, otherworldly horses were emerging from the forest, not normal animals, but creatures that radiated the same magical presence she'd sensed in Nightfall during his cursed years. Shifters, she realized. They're all shifters. But shifters who've been transformed into horses should be in animal form permanently. Kai's mental voice was confused. Like Damon was. Unless, Ember said slowly, they're not cursed. Unless there's something else entirely. The lead horse, a mare with a coat like liquid starlight, stopped at the edge of the manor grounds and shifted. The woman who took her place was tall and elegant, with silver hair that moved like flowing water and eyes that held the depth of ancient wisdom. She wore robes that seemed to be cut from the night sky itself, and power radiated from her like heat from a forge. Oh, Damon's mental voice was filled with awe and recognition. Oh, this is impossible. What? Ember and Kai asked simultaneously. That's Queen Ariana Stormwind. The first Stormcaller. She died 300 years ago. The impossible visitor looked directly up at the nursery window, her ancient eyes meeting Ember's across the distance. When she smiled, it was with the warmth of recognition and approval. Then she spoke, and her voice carried clearly across the grounds, rich with power and purpose. I am Ariana Stormwind, first of our bloodline, keeper of the ancient ways. I have come to welcome my descendant and to offer guidance for the children she carries, the ones who will bridge all worlds and usher in a new age of magic. She gestured to the other horse shifters, who were transforming into human form all around her. We are the eternal herd, stormcallers who chose long ago to take on horse form to better guard the wild places and ancient magics. We have watched, we have waited, and now we have come to serve as mentors and protectors for the next generation. Ember's mind reeled with the implications. An entire community of stormcallers, hidden for centuries, now revealing themselves because of the children she carried. This changes everything, Kai said through their bond. Everything, she agreed. But as she watched the ancient queen and her followers settling onto the manor grounds with obvious intention to stay, Ember felt no fear. Instead, she felt completion, as if pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed were finally falling into place. The twins kicked again, more strongly than ever, and she could swear she felt their excitement through their developing magical signatures. I think, she told Kai with wonder, our children are going to have the most extraordinary education imaginable. Lucky them, he replied, his mental voice warm with love and anticipation. Lucky us. As the sun set over Silver Ridge territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Ember rested her hands on her belly and smiled. The wild horse had indeed been just the beginning, the first note in a symphony of magic and love and possibility that was still being written. And she couldn't wait to hear what came next. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.
I am Ember Thornfield, she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the grove. Stormcaller, soul-bonded mate to your Alpha King, and bearer of the Ravencrest authority. These creatures threaten our pack, our home, our future. We will not run. We will not hide. We will stand together and send them back to whatever hell spawned them. Lightning began to dance around her, not chaotic and destructive, but controlled and beautiful, a display of power that spoke to something primal in every wolf present. You have two choices, she told the assembled pack. You can continue fighting among yourselves while our enemies destroy everything we've built. Or you can trust each other, trust your leaders, and fight as one pack under one banner. She gestured to where Kai and Damon stood side by side, both brothers united in their determination to protect their people. Your Alpha King has never wavered in his duty to protect you. Your rightful heir has sacrificed 5 years of his life to keep this pack safe from corruption. They are both your leaders, both your protectors, both worthy of your loyalty. The pack stirred, sensing the truth in her words, feeling the unity that had been missing since Morgana's death beginning to rebuild itself. Now, Ember said, raising her hands as Stormcaller power merged with Alpha authority, let's show these abominations what happens when you threaten our family. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the pack's history. Ember fought with powers she'd never dreamed of possessing, not just her Stormcaller abilities, but the collective strength of every wolf in Silver Ridge. She could coordinate their movements telepathically, sense threats before they materialized, and direct the pack's efforts with supernatural precision. Lightning rained from the sky at her command, striking down cursed creatures by the dozen. But more importantly, the pack fought as one, unified, coordinated, unstoppable. Kai and Damon fought together, their brotherhood restored and their combined leadership inspiring every wolf who saw them. The political divisions that had threatened to tear the pack apart were forgotten in the face of external threats and shared purpose. But as the battle raged on, Ember began to feel the seductive pull of absolute power. The Alpha authority was intoxicating, offering her the ability to control not just the pack's actions but their thoughts and emotions. She could feel how easy it would be to simply keep the power. To rule as the first Stormcaller Alpha Queen, to reshape the supernatural world according to her will. The temptation was overwhelming, and for a moment, just a moment, she almost gave in. Ember. Kai's voice cut through the haze of power-drunk ambition. Come back to me. I'm here, she replied, but even she could hear the distortion in her mental voice. No, you're not. You're losing yourself in the authority. I can feel it through our bond, the power is changing you. He was right. She could sense it too, now that he'd pointed it out. The pack magic was burning away her individuality, her humanity, trying to transform her into something that existed only to command and control. Just like it had changed Morgana. "Help me," she whispered through their connection. "I don't know how to let go." "Together," Kai replied immediately. "We do this together, just like everything else." She felt him reach through their soul bond, not to take the power from her but to share the burden of holding it. His presence anchored her, reminded her who she was beneath the intoxicating authority. "That's it," he encouraged. "Remember why you took the power in the first place. Not to rule, but to protect. Not to control, but to serve." With his help, Ember managed to pull back from the brink of corruption. The alpha power was still there, still tempting, but she could resist its call now. The battle reached its climax as the last of the cursed creatures fell to the pack's coordinated assault. In the sudden silence that followed, Ember stood in the center of the grove, surrounded by exhausted but victorious wolves, still holding power that could reshape the supernatural world. Every eye was on her. Every wolf waited to see what she would do with the authority she'd claimed. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the temptation rose again. She could keep the power, rule with wisdom and strength, unite all the packs under her leadership. Instead, she turned to Kai and held out her hands. "I believe this belongs to you," she said simply. The power transfer back to Kai was gentler than the original working, but no less significant. As the alpha authority flowed away from her, Ember felt a profound sense of relief. She was herself again, no longer drunk on power, no longer tempted by the corruption that had claimed Morgana. "I'm proud of you," Kai told her through their bond. "That was the hardest thing you could have done." "Second hardest," she corrected. "The hardest was trusting you enough to take the power in the first place." As dawn broke over the sacred grove, the Silver Ridge pack stood united for the first time in months. The immediate threats had been defeated, the curse had been contained, and the question of leadership had been resolved in a way that honored both brothers. But Ember knew this was only the beginning. Word of tonight's events would spread throughout the supernatural world, drawing both allies and enemies to Silver Ridge. Her demonstration of Stormcaller power combined with Alpha authority would make her a target for every dark force seeking to either control or destroy such abilities. Good thing she wasn't facing the future alone. "Whatever comes next," Kai said, echoing her thoughts, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and promise. And for the first time since this all began, Ember truly believed they could handle whatever the supernatural world threw at them. After all, they'd already survived the impossible. Chapter 8. 3 days after the battle in the sacred grove, Ember stood before the mirror in what had once been the guest room and was now officially her chambers as Luna of the Silver Ridge pack. The reflection staring back at her was familiar yet utterly transformed. Her auburn hair now carried threads of silver that caught the light like captured lightning. Her green eyes held depths they'd never possessed before, not just the power of storms, but the ancient wisdom of the spirit realm. Most startling of all were the markings that had appeared along her arms and shoulders, intricate patterns that looked like stylized lightning bolts intertwined with shadow vines, dark and beautiful against her pale skin. The marks of a storm alpha. Something that had never existed before, something she'd become through necessity and choice and the strange alchemy of love and sacrifice. "You're beautiful," Kai's voice whispered through their bond, warm with love and wonder. She turned to find him in the doorway, dressed in the simple clothes he preferred when not performing his official duties. The past few days had been a whirlwind of pack politics, alliance negotiations, and damage assessment, but somehow he always found time to simply be with her. "The markings are spreading," she said, gesturing to the new patterns that had appeared overnight. "Does it hurt?" "No. It's more like my body is finally becoming what it was always meant to be." She moved closer to him, marveling again at how perfectly they fit together. "The spirit realm changed me, Kai. I can feel it every day, becoming more than human, more than wolf, more than stormcaller." "Are you afraid?" The question deserved honest consideration. 3 days ago, the idea of transformation on this scale would have terrified her. Now, No, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I know what I am now. What we are together. And I'm not afraid of becoming more than I was. Good, Damon's voice spoke directly into her mind, his telepathic abilities having grown stronger since his freedom from the curse. Because the Council of Alphas has arrived, and they're very interested in meeting the new Storm Alpha. Ember sighed. She'd been dreading this moment since word of the battle had spread beyond Silver Ridge territory. The Council of Alphas governed supernatural law across North America, and they took a very dim view of unauthorized power demonstrations. How many? Kai asked aloud, knowing his brother was listening. All of them. 12 Alpha Kings and Queens, plus their entourages. They've set up a formal tribunal in the Great Hall. A tribunal? Ember's stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. It could go either way, Damon admitted. They're either here to officially recognize your new status, or to decide if you're too dangerous to live. Well, Kai said with grim humor, at least we'll know where we stand. The Great Hall had been transformed into something resembling a courtroom, with the 12 members of the council arrayed in a semicircle of throne-like chairs. Each alpha radiated power and authority, their combined presence making the air itself feel heavy with supernatural weight. Alpha Marcus Ironwood, who had challenged Kai just days earlier, sat at the center of the arrangement. His expression was carefully neutral, but Ember could sense the calculation behind his eyes. To his right sat Alpha Queen Celine Nightshade, a striking woman with silver hair and violet eyes who ruled the largest pack on the West Coast. To his left was Alpha King Theodore Grimwald, whose northern territory bordered several other countries and whose political influence extended far beyond the supernatural world. Ember walked into the hall flanked by both Ravencrest brothers, a symbolic gesture that hadn't been lost on anyone present. Damon had officially resumed his position as heir and first beta, while Kai continued as Alpha King with the pack's unanimous support. The arrangement was unprecedented, but it worked, and more importantly, it showed the council that Silver Ridge was unified and strong. Ember Thornfield, Alpha Marcus began without preamble, you stand accused of unauthorized magical experimentation, wielding powers beyond your station, and creating a new category of supernatural being without council oversight. Those are serious charges, Kai said before Ember could respond. I hope the council has evidence to support them. The evidence, Alpha Queen Celine said smoothly, is standing before us. Miss Thornfield's transformation is obvious to anyone with magical sight. The question is whether that transformation was legal under supernatural law. And if it wasn't? Ember asked, keeping her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Then the council has the authority to reverse it, Alpha Theodore replied. By any means necessary. The threat hung in the air like a blade. They were talking about stripping away everything she'd become, possibly killing her in the process. Not while I draw breath, Kai's mental voice was fierce with protective fury. Or mine, Damon added. Let them try to harm her. They'll learn what happens when you threaten a Ravencrest's family. But before either brother could speak aloud, another voice cut through the tension. Actually, I believe you'll find that Miss Thornfield's transformation was entirely legal. Everyone turned to see Lydia entering the hall, carrying an ancient leather-bound tome that practically radiated age and authority. Beta Stormwind, Alpha Marcus said with obvious irritation, this is a formal council session. Your presence hasn't been requested. My presence is required, Lydia replied calmly, as keeper of the Ravencrest family records and expert in supernatural law dating back to the original pack charters. She opened the tome with careful reverence, its pages crackling with age and power. According to the Covenant of the First Packs, established in 1623, any individual who undergoes transformation through willing sacrifice to save pack members is not only legal but protected under ancient law. Lydia's voice carried the authority of centuries. Furthermore, such individuals are granted automatic recognition as pack leaders, regardless of their original bloodline status. That's a very old law, Alpha Queen Celine observed. Some would argue it's no longer relevant. Some would be wrong, Lydia replied. The covenant has never been revoked or superseded. It remains the foundational law of our people. Alpha Marcus leaned forward, his expression skeptical. Even if we accept that argument, Miss Thornfield's transformation goes far beyond anything contemplated in 1623. Storm alphas didn't exist when that law was written. No, Lydia agreed, but the law was specifically written to accommodate new forms of leadership that might emerge through sacrifice and need. The founding alphas were wise enough to recognize that power evolves, and that those who risk everything to protect their people deserve recognition rather than punishment. Ember felt a surge of gratitude toward her cousin, but she also knew that legal arguments might not be enough to sway the council. These were politicians as much as leaders, and they were concerned about precedent and control as much as justice. There's something else, Ember said, stepping forward. Something the council needs to understand about what happened during the ritual. Speak, Alpha Theodore commanded. The transformation wasn't something I chose or planned. It was a response to an unprecedented threat, not just to Silver Ridge, but to the entire supernatural community. Ember took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to reveal would change everything. Morgana wasn't working alone. She was serving something called the Void, an entity from outside our reality that feeds on magical corruption. Murmurs rippled through the assembled alphas. Several exchanged worried glances. You claim to have fought this Void? Alpha Queen Selene asked. In the spirit realm, yes. Along with Kai and my mother's spirit. Ember could feel the council's skepticism, but she pressed on. The corruption Morgana spread through Silver Ridge was just one feeding line. There are others, in other territories, other packs. The Void is patient, methodical, and it's been working to weaken our defenses for decades. Even if that's true, Alpha Marcus said, what does it have to do with your unauthorized transformation? Because I'm not the only one who's going to need these powers. Ember looked around the circle of powerful alphas, seeing the dawning understanding in some of their faces. The Void will return, probably with allies and better preparation. When it does, we'll need leaders who can fight on both the physical and spiritual planes. We'll need storm alphas. The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. If Ember was right, her transformation wasn't an aberration, it was the beginning of an evolution that might be necessary for their species' survival. Alpha King Theodore was the first to speak. You're suggesting that other packs might need to undergo similar changes? I'm suggesting that rigid adherence to old hierarchies and power structures might get us all killed, Ember replied. The supernatural world is changing, whether we like it or not. We can adapt and survive, or we can cling to tradition and face extinction. Well said, Damon's mental voice was warm with approval. You sound like a true alpha. She is a true alpha, Kai added through their bond. The pack has already accepted her as such. As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hall. The massive doors opened to admit a delegation of Silver Ridge wolves, not the formal representatives who might normally attend such meetings, but ordinary pack members. Families with children, elderly wolves, young adults who had fought in the recent battle. They filed in silently, forming ranks behind Ember, Kai, and Damon. Their message was clear: whatever the council decided, the Silver Ridge pack stood with their leaders. Alpha Marcus's expression darkened. This is highly irregular. Pack members don't attend council sessions. With respect, said a voice from the crowd, our Luna risked her life to save us. We have the right to witness how the council treats that sacrifice. The speaker was Derek Moon Whisper, the same wolf who had framed Ember for theft, who had wanted her dead just weeks ago. His presence here, speaking in her defense, was perhaps the strongest statement possible about how completely things had changed. Alpha Queen Selene studied the assembled pack members with calculating eyes. Luna? They call you Luna? The pack chose me, Ember said simply. Not because of my bloodline or magical power, but because of my actions. Because I proved I would put their welfare above my own ambition. And you? Selene turned to Kai. You accept this unprecedented arrangement? I more than accept it. I embrace it. Kai moved to stand beside Ember, taking her hand in his. Ember isn't just my mate, she's my equal, my partner in leadership. The pack is stronger with both of us guiding it. And what of the traditional succession? Alpha Theodore asked, looking at Damon. You're the rightful heir, are you not? Damon stepped forward, his presence commanding despite his recent ordeal. I am the firstborn, yes. But I'm also a wolf who spent 5 years learning what it means to be powerless, to be at the mercy of others' choices. That experience taught me that true leadership isn't about birthright, it's about service. He gestured to Kai and Ember. My brother has proven his worth as an alpha through 5 years of wise rule. Ember has proven hers through sacrifice and courage. I'm content to serve as their beta and heir, knowing that Silver Ridge is in capable hands. Most irregular, Alpha Marcus muttered, but some of the hostility had left his expression. Perhaps, Alpha Queen Celine said thoughtfully, irregularity is exactly what we need. She rose from her throne, moving to stand directly in front of Ember. This close, her violet eyes seemed to peer straight through to Ember's soul. You claim the void will return, she said quietly. What makes you so certain? Because entities like that don't give up easily. And because... Ember hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. Because I can still sense it, faintly, through the connections formed during our battle. It's watching, planning, looking for new ways to corrupt and feed. And you think you can stop it? I think we can stop it. All of us, working together, sharing power instead of hoarding it. Ember met Celine's penetrating gaze steadily. But not if we're too busy fighting over tradition and protocol to recognize real threats. Celine studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You know, I think I like you. Chapter 7. The soul bond changed everything. Ember could feel Kai's presence like a constant heartbeat beneath her skin, his emotions flowing through her consciousness like a second stream of thought. When he was worried, her stomach tightened. When he was angry, lightning danced at her fingertips. When he looked at her with that particular intensity that meant he was thinking about kissing her, heat pooled low in her belly as if his desire were her own. Which, she supposed, it was now. They'd returned to the manor to find chaos waiting. News of Morgana's death had spread through the pack like wildfire, but instead of bringing relief, it had created a power vacuum that threatened to tear Silver Ridge apart. Some wolves supported Kai's continued leadership, arguing that 5 years of rule had proven his worth. Others demanded that Damon be restored as the rightful Alpha King, claiming that Kai had never been legitimate in the first place. The pack was splitting down the middle, and both brothers were caught in the center of a storm neither of them had asked for. This is exactly what she wanted, Damon said grimly as they stood in Kai's study, listening to the sounds of heated arguments from the great hall below. Even in death, Morgana is destroying our family. The pack laws are clear, Lydia pointed out from her position by the window. Damon is the firstborn. By rights, he should resume leadership immediately. By rights, maybe. But the reality is more complicated. Kai moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. Through their bond, Ember could feel his exhaustion, his frustration, his deep love for his brother warring with his sense of duty to the pack. I've been Alpha King for 5 years. I've made alliances, established policies, built relationships with other packs. Simply stepping aside now could destabilize the entire region. And I've been a horse for 5 years, Damon added with dark humor. I have no idea what's been happening in the supernatural world, no knowledge of current politics or threats. Taking over immediately would be irresponsible. So what do you suggest? Ember asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Damon and Kai exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that only came from a lifetime of brotherhood. A shared transition, Kai said slowly. I continue as Alpha King for now, while Damon gradually resumes his role as my heir and eventual successor. We work together to heal the pack and address the damage Morgana caused. That could work, Lydia agreed. But there's still the matter of the curse. Damon may be human again, but the spiritual bonds that held him for 5 years haven't been completely severed. Without proper cleansing, those bonds will eventually reassert themselves. How long do we have? Ember asked. Days, maybe a week, Damon said quietly. I can already feel it pulling at me, the animal form trying to reclaim me. Each time I shift to wolf form, it gets harder to change back. The solution came to Ember with the sudden clarity of lightning illuminating a dark landscape. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it might be the only way to save both brothers and keep the pack together. There's another option, she said slowly. But it's risky. Tell us, Kai said immediately. What if we split the curse between multiple people? Instead of trying to break it completely or transfer it to someone else, we divide the burden so that no one person has to bear it all. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Split it how? Lydia asked. Between Kai and me. We're already soul bonded, which means we can share magical burdens more easily than most. If we take half the curse each, it might be weak enough that our combined healing abilities can gradually burn it away over time. Absolutely not, Kai said immediately. I won't let you take on any part of a curse meant for my family. It's not your choice, Ember replied calmly. We're soul bonded now, remember? Your burdens are my burdens, and vice versa. Besides, she added through their mental link, you don't get to be all noble and self-sacrificing when I've already decided to risk everything for you. That's different, he replied silently. You're... what? More important than you? Don't even think about finishing that sentence. Aloud, she continued, the bigger problem is that splitting a curse like this requires a very specific ritual. One that involves temporarily transferring all of Kai's alpha power to me while the magical bonds are redistributed. That's... Lydia looked stunned. That's never been attempted. Alphas don't just hand over their power, especially not to non-pack members. I'm not exactly a non-pack member anymore, Ember pointed out. The soul bond makes me part of Kai's bloodline, magically speaking. And Damon's telepathic connection to me means I already have ties to the Ravencrest family magic. It could work, Damon said thoughtfully. But the risk. I know the risk. If something goes wrong during the power transfer, we could both be left powerless. Or worse, the alpha magic could burn through my system and kill me. Ember looked directly at Kai. But if we don't try, you lose your brother anyway. And the pack tears itself apart in the resulting power struggle. Kai was quiet for a long moment, his emotions churning through their bond, fear for her safety, love for his brother, duty to the pack, and something else. Something that felt like pride. You're asking me to trust you with everything, he said finally. Not just my life, but my ability to protect the people I care about. Yes. And if I refuse? Then we find another way. But this is the best option we have. Kai closed his eyes, and Ember felt the weight of his decision pressing down on both of them through their connection. When he opened them again, his expression was resolute. What do you need me to do? The ritual required specific timing, location, and components that took the rest of the day to gather. They would perform it at midnight in the pack's sacred grove, a circle of ancient oaks where generations of Ravencrest alphas had been crowned and buried. The location's accumulated power would help stabilize the dangerous magic they were about to attempt. As evening fell, Ember found herself in her guest room, trying to prepare mentally for what was coming. The ritual components were laid out on the dresser. Candles made from beeswax and wolf sage, crystals attuned to pack magic, and a silver chalice that had belonged to the first Ravencrest Alpha King. She was examining the ancient cup when a knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Damon entered, closing the door behind him. In the lamplight, he looked more like Kai than ever, the same strong features and steel-gray eyes, though his face bore the marks of his long ordeal in ways that were hard to define. I wanted to thank you, he said without preamble. For everything you've risked to help me. For what you're about to risk tonight. You don't need to thank me. You're family now. Am I? Damon moved to the window, staring out at the sacred grove visible in the distance. I'd been gone for 5 years, Ember. 5 years while Kai built this pack into something strong and unified. The wolves who follow him now, they don't know me. As far as they're concerned, I'm a stranger claiming a birthright I've done nothing to earn. You're Kai's brother. That makes you pack. But what if they're right? What if I'm not fit to be Alpha King anymore? Damon turned to face her, and she could see the doubt eating away at him. What if 5 years as an animal have changed me too much? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Through her connection to Kai, Ember could sense that he'd wrestled with similar fears, not about Damon's fitness to rule, but about whether stepping aside would ultimately help or hurt the pack. Do you want to be Alpha King? She asked directly. Damon was quiet for a moment. I used to. Before the curse, leadership felt like my destiny, my purpose. But now. He shrugged. Now I just want to be human. To have choices. To find out who I am when I'm not defined by duty and birthright. Then maybe that's your answer. What do you mean? Maybe the question isn't whether you should be Alpha King, but whether you want to be. And maybe there's a way for you to choose your own path while still honoring your family's legacy. Before Damon could respond, another knock interrupted them. This time it was Lydia, her expression grim. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Scouts have reported movement in the forest. A large force approaching from the south. What kind of force? Ember asked. Creatures. Twisted things that were once wolves, but corrupted by dark magic. At least 50 of them, moving in perfect formation. Lydia's jaw tightened. It's Morgana's final trap. She must have prepared them in advance, with orders to attack if she died. Through their soul bond, Ember felt Kai's immediate shift to battle readiness, his mind already calculating defensive strategies and pack deployment. A moment later, he burst through the door, fully armed and radiating lethal authority. How long do we have? He demanded. An hour, maybe 2. They're moving slowly, but deliberately. This isn't a random attack, it's a coordinated assault designed to hit us when we're most vulnerable. During the ritual, Ember realized. She knew we'd try to break the remaining curse bonds. She planned for this. Then we postponed the ritual, Kai said immediately. Deal with the threat first, then worry about. No. Damon's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. If we wait, the curse will reclaim me. And fighting those creatures with a compromised alpha, one who might transform at any moment, would be suicide. So what do you suggest? We do the ritual now. Tonight, before the attack arrives. Damon's expression was resolute. It's risky, but if Ember can successfully take on the alpha power and half the curse, she'll be strong enough to help defend the pack. Maybe strong enough to turn the tide. You're talking about asking her to manage unprecedented magical power while fighting for her life, Lydia pointed out. The stress alone could kill her. I can handle it, Ember said, though privately she wasn't entirely certain. The idea of wielding alpha magic while battling cursed creatures was terrifying, but the alternative, watching the pack be destroyed because they'd waited too long, was worse. Are you sure about this? Kai asked through their bond. No, she replied honestly. But I'm sure about us. About what we can accomplish together. His mental response was warm with love and trust and absolute faith in her abilities. It was exactly what she needed to hear. We do the ritual now, Kai decided. Compressed timeline, minimal ceremony. Just the essential components. I'll alert the Pack Council, Lydia said. They'll need to witness the power transfer to make it legitimate. And I'll prepare the grove, Damon added. If we're doing this fast, we can't afford any mistakes with the ritual setup. As they scattered to handle their preparations, Ember remained in her room for a moment longer, staring at her reflection in the mirror. In a few hours, she would either be one of the most powerful beings in the supernatural world, or she would be dead. Either way, her life as a simple half-blood on the pack's edges was over forever. The sacred grove at midnight was a place of ancient power and terrible beauty. The ritual circle had been carved into the earth generations ago, its boundaries marked by standing stones that hummed with accumulated magic. Tonight, those stones glowed with soft silver light, responding to the pack's emotional intensity and the approaching magical working. The entire Silver Ridge pack had gathered to witness the ceremony, over 200 wolves forming concentric circles around the ritual space. Some faces showed support and hope, others displayed skepticism or outright hostility. The political divisions that had emerged after Morgana's death were clearly visible in the crowd's arrangement. Ember stood at the circle's center, wearing a simple white dress that would allow her to shift forms if necessary. The ritual components were arranged on a stone altar before her: candles, crystals, the silver chalice filled with a mixture of her blood and Kai's. Kai stood opposite her, dressed in the ceremonial robes of an Alpha King. He'd removed all symbols of his authority, crown, rings, amulets, and placed them on the altar. For the ritual to work, he had to surrender his power completely, trusting her to hold it safely and return it when the magic was complete. Damon stood to one side, ready to anchor the curse-splitting spell through his telepathic connection to both of them. His role was perhaps the most dangerous. He would have to open himself completely to the curse magic, allowing it to flow through him as it moved from its current bonds to its new hosts. "Are you ready?" Lydia asked from her position at the circle's edge. As the pack's senior beta, she would oversee the ceremony and ensure its legitimacy. "Ready," Ember confirmed, though her heart was racing fast enough that she was sure everyone could hear it. "I'm here," Kai's voice whispered through their bond. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." "And I'm with you," she replied. "Always." The ceremony began with the traditional pack chants, voices rising in harmonies that had been sung for centuries. The power in the grove grew stronger as the pack's collective will focused on the working ahead. Then Lydia raised her hands for silence. "We gather tonight to witness an unprecedented act of sacrifice and trust," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the grove. "Kai Ravencrest, Alpha King of the Silver Ridge Pack, will temporarily surrender his power to Ember Thornfield, Stormcaller and soul-bonded mate, so that she may bear half the curse that threatens his brother's life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others concerned. "This working has never been attempted," Lydia continued. "The risks are enormous. But the alternative, watching Damon Ravencrest fall back under Morgana's curse, is unacceptable. Do you, Kai Ravencrest, freely choose to surrender your alpha power?" "I do," Kai said clearly. "I surrender my authority, my strength, and my magical sovereignty to Ember Thornfield, trusting her to use them wisely and return them when the working is complete." "And do you, Ember Thornfield, accept this responsibility?" Ember looked out at the gathered pack, seeing their faces in the candlelight. Some of these wolves had never accepted her as anything more than a half-blood nuisance. Others had come to respect her strength and courage. All of them were now depending on her to save their future Alpha King and preserve the pack's unity. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was undertaking. The actual power transfer was unlike anything she could have imagined. It started as a warm tingling in her hands, then spread up her arms like liquid lightning. But this wasn't her familiar Stormcaller magic. This was something deeper, more primal. Pack magic, alpha authority, the mystical bonds that connected every wolf in Silver Ridge to their leader. She could suddenly sense every member of the pack as if they were part of her own body. Their strengths, their fears, their individual personalities, all of it flowed into her consciousness in an overwhelming flood of information and emotion. "Stay focused," Damon's voice reached her through their telepathic link. "The curse transfer comes next, and you'll need to maintain control of the alpha power while splitting the curse bonds." Ember gritted her teeth and reached for the discipline she'd learned in her years of survival. The pack magic was intoxicating, offering her more power than she'd ever dreamed of possessing. She could sense how easy it would be to lose herself in that authority, to become drunk on the ability to command and control. But Kai's presence in her mind kept her grounded. His trust, his love, his absolute faith that she would use the power responsibly and return it when the working was done. The curse came next. It flowed from Damon like poisonous honey, thick with Morgana's malevolent will and 5 years of accumulated suffering. Ember felt it trying to take hold of her, to transform her into something inhuman and trapped. But she was ready for it. Instead of resisting the curse or trying to contain it, she split it, sending half to herself and half to Kai through their soul bond. Shared between them, diluted by their combined magical strength, the curse's power was manageable. "It's working," Kai's mental voice was filled with wonder and relief. "I can feel the curse, but it's not overwhelming." It's like background noise instead of a roar. Same here, Ember agreed. We can burn this away gradually, little by little, until it's gone completely. The gathered pack sensed the working success and erupted in cheers. But their celebration was cut short by a sound that made every wolf's blood run cold, the howling of creatures that had once been pack but were now something else entirely. Morgana's cursed army had arrived. They poured out of the forest like a nightmare made manifest, wolves twisted by dark magic into something that barely resembled their original forms. Their eyes glowed with unnatural hunger, their movements were too fluid and predatory, and the wrongness radiating from them made every true wolf present want to flee in terror. Battle formation. Lydia commanded, but her voice was nearly drowned out by the sounds of attacking creatures and panicking pack members. Ember, Kai's voice was urgent in her mind. You need to return my power so I can lead the defense. No, she replied, watching the cursed creatures tear into the pack's outer defenses. You're still adjusting to your half of the curse. Fighting while magically compromised could get you killed. Then what do you suggest? Ember looked out at the chaos surrounding them, pack members scattering, the cursed creatures pressing their attack, the careful ritual circle trampled under fleeing feet. She was holding the concentrated authority of an alpha king, power that connected her to every wolf in the pack. She could feel their fear, their confusion, their desperate need for leadership. The smart thing would be to return Kai's power immediately and let him handle the crisis. But the smart thing wouldn't address the pack's deeper problems. The political divisions that had emerged after Morgana's death, the question of legitimate succession, the need for unity in the face of external threats. Trust me, she told Kai. I have an idea. Then she rose to her full height, alpha power crackling around her like visible lightning, and spoke with a voice that carried the authority of centuries of Ravencrest rule. Enough. The single word, backed by pack magic and stormcaller power, stopped the battle as if someone had thrown a switch. Cursed creatures froze mid-attack. Fleeing wolves turned back toward the ritual circle. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ember spun around to find herself face to face with a woman who looked exactly like her, only older and somehow more substantial. She wore a dress that seemed to be cut from storm clouds themselves, and her auburn hair moved in a wind that touched nothing else. Mother? Seraphina Stormwind smiled, and it was like watching sunrise break through hurricane clouds. You've grown into your power beautifully. I'm so proud of you. You're dead. Morgana killed you when I was 3. Death is just another realm, like this one. And some bonds are stronger than the barrier between life and death. Seraphina moved closer, her presence radiating warmth and love and infinite sadness. I've been watching over you, protecting you as much as I could from the spirit realm. Why didn't you tell me what I was? What I could do? Because knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, and wisdom only comes through experience. Seraphina's expression grew serious. But also because I hoped you might find a different path than the one that claimed me. What do you mean? Stormcallers are guardians, Ember. Protectors of the balance between the magical and mundane worlds. But with that responsibility comes terrible temptation, the power to reshape reality itself, to impose our will on the world. Seraphina gestured to the swirling energies around them. I refused Morgana's offer not just because I disagreed with her methods, but because I recognized the hunger for power in myself. I was afraid of what I might become. Ember felt a chill that had nothing to do with the spirit realm's ethereal atmosphere. Are you saying I shouldn't use my powers to save Kai? I'm saying you need to understand the full cost before you decide. Seraphina raised her hand, and images began to form in the mists around them, visions of possible futures, each one showing Ember in a different scenario. In the first, she saw herself standing over Kai's healed body, but her eyes glowed with cold power and her expression was distant, inhuman. The healing had worked, but something essential about who she was had been lost in the process. In the second, she saw herself fighting an endless series of battles against dark forces drawn to her power, never able to rest, never able to have a normal life or relationship. The price of saving one life was a lifetime of conflict. In the third, she saw herself consumed by the very power she'd tried to control, transformed into something more elemental force than person, her humanity burned away by Stormcaller magic. These are all possible futures, Seraphina explained. Using your full power here, in the spirit realm, will set you on one of these paths. Are you prepared for that? Ember looked at the visions, seeing the terrible cost of her choice written in light and shadow. Then she thought about Kai's smile, the way he'd looked at her when he said he loved her, the future they might have together if she could save him. What about the fourth option Damon mentioned? Working with Kai to share the burden? Possible, but even more dangerous. Seraphina's expression grew troubled. Soul bonding with someone in the spirit realm creates a permanent connection. You would be linked to Kai for the rest of your lives, sharing not just power but emotions, thoughts, even lifespan. If one of you dies, the other follows. If one of you is corrupted by dark magic, it affects both. Are you prepared to give up that much independence? The question hit harder than any of the visions. Ember had spent her entire life fighting for independence, for the right to make her own choices and control her own destiny. The idea of being permanently bound to anyone, even Kai, was terrifying. But as she considered it, she realized something else. She was already bound to him. Not by magic or spirit realm connections, but by choice. By love. By the simple fact that his death would destroy something essential inside her, regardless of any mystical bonds. How do I link with him? Ember, are you certain? Once this connection is forged. I'm certain. Ember turned toward the flickering silver light that represented Kai's spirit. I love him, Mother. Not just the man he is now, but who he could become, who we could become together. I'm willing to take the risk. Seraphina studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'll help you. But first, you need to understand what you're really facing. She gestured again, and the mists around them cleared to reveal the true scope of the cursed poison eating away at Kai's spirit. It wasn't just Morgana's malevolent magic, it was connected to something much older and darker, a source of corruption that had been feeding on werewolf magic for generations. Morgana was just a servant, Seraphina explained. The real enemy is something called the Void, an entity from outside our reality that seeks to devour all magical energy. It's been using corrupted magic users like Morgana to weaken the barriers between realms. So healing Kai means fighting this void directly? More than that. It means cutting off one of the void's primary feeding sources in this region. The corruption Morgana spread through the Silver Ridge Pack has been like a beacon, drawing the entity's attention. Seraphina's expression was grim. If you succeed in purging that corruption, you'll have declared war on something that considers entire worlds expendable. The revelation should have terrified her. Instead, Ember felt a strange sense of completion, as if she'd finally found the purpose she'd been unconsciously searching for her entire life. Then we'd better make sure we win. Seraphina smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like Ember remembered from her earliest childhood, warm, loving, infinitely strong. That's my daughter. Now, let me show you how to forge a soul bond with someone you love. The process was unlike anything Ember could have imagined. Following her mother's guidance, she approached Kai's spirit form, a manifestation that looked like him but translucent, as if he were made of moonlight and memory. The cursed poison clung to him like black tar, eating away at the edges of his spiritual essence. Kai, she called softly. Can you hear me? His spirit eyes opened, focusing on her with effort. Ember? How are you here? I'm here to help. But I need you to trust me completely, more than you've ever trusted anyone. I do trust you. Even after everything with Morgana, everything I did wrong. This isn't about that. Ember knelt beside his spirit form, seeing how the poison was spreading toward his heart. I'm going to link our souls together so we can fight this curse as one. But it means we'll be connected forever, literally. Are you willing? Kai's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that might have been awe. You're talking about a true soul bond. Ember, that's not something to enter into lightly. I know what it means. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the warmth of his spirit essence beneath her palms. I know it means sharing everything, power, emotion, lifespan, destiny. I know it means if one of us falls to darkness, we both do. I know it's dangerous and permanent and completely insane. Then why? Because I love you, you impossible, stubborn, secretive alpha. Because the thought of living without you is worse than any risk. Because I'd rather spend 50 years bound to your soul than 100 years free but alone. Kai stared at her for a long moment, then reached up to cup her face in his hands. Are you absolutely certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Then yes. 1,000 times yes. He sat up with effort, the movement causing some of the poison to flake away like old paint. How do we do this? You need to open your spirits to each other completely. Serafina's voice reached them both now, the dead Stormcaller apparently able to communicate with Kai in this realm. No secrets, no barriers, no protection. It will be the most vulnerable either of you has ever been. I can do that, Kai said, looking directly into Ember's eyes. Can you? Ember thought about all the walls she'd built over the years, all the defenses against a world that had never wanted her. The idea of dropping them completely, even for Kai, was terrifying. But love, she realized, was supposed to be terrifying. I can do that. They sat facing each other in the swirling mists of the spirit realm, hands clasped, eyes locked. Then, following Serafina's whispered instructions, they began to lower their spiritual defenses. It started as a trickle, small thoughts and emotions passing between them. Ember felt Kai's wonder at her courage, his guilt over keeping secrets, his absolute determination to protect her no matter the cost. In return, he felt her fear of abandonment, her fierce loyalty, her growing certainty that he was worth any risk. Then the trickle became a flood. Memories rushed between them, Kai's childhood with Damon, the weight of unexpected leadership, the loneliness of command. Ember's years of rejection and struggle, the desperate hunger for belonging, the moment she'd first seen him and felt something fundamental shift in her world. Their spirits began to intertwine, silver light and storm-touched power weaving together into something entirely new. The bond that formed was like lightning made solid, beautiful and dangerous and absolutely unbreakable. Now, Serafina commanded. While your powers are joined, strike at the corruption. Ember and Kai reached out together, their combined will focused on the black poison eating away at his spirit. But instead of trying to fight it directly, they transformed it, Stormcaller lightning and alpha strength working in perfect harmony to change corruption into purification, poison into medicine. The curse magic didn't just dissolve, it reversed, flowing backward through the connections Morgana had established, purging corruption from the entire Silver Ridge Pack territory. Ember could sense wolves throughout the region suddenly breathing easier as dark influence lifted from their minds. But the effort was enormous. Even working together, they were draining their spiritual essence rapidly. Hold on, Damon's voice reached them from the physical realm. I can feel the curse breaking, but you're both fading. You need to return before. His warning was cut off as something else entered the spirit realm. The void. It arrived not as a creature or entity, but as an absence, a hungry emptiness that devoured light and hope and magic itself. The beautiful, impossible landscape of the spirit realm began to wither in its presence, colors fading to gray, music falling silent. It's here, Serafina said urgently. The void has noticed what you're doing. You need to leave, now. But even as she spoke, Ember could sense the truth. The entity was between them and the path back to the physical realm. To return, they would have to go through it. We fight, Kai said simply, his spirit form blazing brighter as he prepared for battle. Together, Ember agreed, storm power crackling around her like a living thing. Together, Serafina added, and suddenly she was there beside them, her own considerable power joining their soul bond. A Stormcaller's fight is never fought alone. The battle that followed was beyond anything that could be described in mortal terms. Lightning clashed with emptiness, alpha strength wrestled with cosmic hunger, love and determination stood against the entropy of universal darkness. And somehow, impossibly, they won. Not by destroying the void, that was beyond any mortal power, but by severing its connection to their realm, cutting the feeding lines it had established through corrupted magic users like Morgana. The entity retreated, not defeated but denied, returning to whatever dark space between realities it called home. As it departed, the spirit realm began to restore itself, color and music and impossible beauty flowing back into the mystic landscape. "It's over," Seraphina said, her form beginning to fade as the immediate crisis passed. "The void will seek other sources of power, but it will leave this region alone for now." "What about the soul bond?" Ember asked. "Are we permanently connected?" "Yes. You'll share power, emotions, and lifespan for the rest of your lives." Seraphina smiled. "But given how you two were looking at each other anyway, I suspect that would have happened regardless of any mystical bonds." "And the cost? The mark that using my full power was supposed to leave? Shared between two souls instead of borne by one. You'll still face challenges, still draw attention from dark forces, but you won't face them alone." Seraphina began to fade more rapidly. "It's time for you to return. Damon is getting worried, and your physical bodies need attention." "Wait," Ember called out. "Will I see you again? When your time comes to cross over permanently, I'll be waiting. Until then, live, daughter. Love. Be happy. That's all any mother wants for her child." And then she was gone, leaving only the fading scent of rain and roses. "Ember, Kai," Damon's voice was urgent now. "You need to come back. Your bodies are starting to fade." Ember looked at Kai, seeing her own soul reflected in his spirit eyes, feeling the incredible new connection that bound them together. It was overwhelming and terrifying and absolutely right. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "With you? I'm ready for anything." Hand in hand, souls intertwined, they stepped out of the spirit realm and back into the world of flesh and blood and morning sunlight. The return was gentler than the departure, like surfacing from deep water instead of being struck by lightning. Ember opened her eyes to find herself still kneeling beside Kai on the mountain ledge, but everything had changed. She could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own, sense his thoughts and emotions as easily as her own breathing. The soul bond had held across the transition between realms. More importantly, Kai was healed. The curse poison was gone, purged by their combined effort in the spirit realm. His color was returning, his breathing strong and steady. "Did it work?" Damon asked urgently. "It worked," Kai said, sitting up slowly. His voice was stronger than it had been in hours. "The curse is broken, the void is banished, and..." He looked at Ember with wonder. "We're soul bonded." "Soul bonded?" Lydia's eyebrows rose. "That's not exactly what I had in mind when I suggested joint healing. It was the only way to generate enough power," Ember explained. "And it means we'll face whatever comes next together." "And what comes next," Damon observed silently, "is probably going to be very interesting." Ember looked out over Silver Ridge territory, feeling the changes their spirit realm battle had wrought. The land itself felt cleaner, freed from the corruption that had been slowly poisoning it for years. The pack bonds were stronger, the magical balance restored. But she could also sense new challenges on the horizon. Word of her Stormcaller abilities would spread, drawing both allies and enemies. The supernatural world was about to become a much more dangerous place. Good thing she wouldn't be facing it alone. As if reading her thoughts, which he probably was, thanks to their new connection, Kai took her hand and squeezed gently. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we'll handle it together," she agreed. And as the sun climbed higher over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility, Ember allowed herself to believe that together might just be enough. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered, her hands hovering over the bolt. "Not now. Not like this. Ember." His voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry. About the research, the secrets. I never meant to hurt you. Save your strength. I'm going to get this bolt out and then we're going to have a very long conversation about trust and communication. Can't pull it out. Too much damage. Watch me." But even as she said it, Ember could see the truth in his fading eyes. The bolt had punched through vital organs. Removing it would only cause more bleeding, and with his healing suppressed by whatever Morgana had drugged him with, he wouldn't survive the trauma. Unless... Stormcaller healing, Damon's voice was urgent. It's not just about controlling weather. The old legends say stormcallers could heal with lightning, channel life force through electrical impulses. I don't know how, Ember said desperately. You don't know how to call lightning either, but you're doing it. Trust your instincts. Around them, the battle raged as Lydia and her forces fought Morgana's corrupted pack members. But Ember's entire world had narrowed to the man dying in her arms. She placed her hands on either side of the iron bolt and closed her eyes, reaching for the storm within herself. Not the destructive aspect this time, but the life-giving force of electricity itself. The spark that animated all living things. Power flowed through her, different from the raw destruction she'd wielded before. This was precise, controlled, infinitely more complex. She could feel Kai's damaged organs, sense the torn blood vessels and bruised tissues. Lightning arced between her fingers, but instead of striking outward, it flowed into Kai's body. Not the chaotic energy of a natural storm, but the organized electrical impulses that governed heartbeat and breathing and cellular repair. It's working, Damon said in amazement. His healing is starting to respond. But healing magic required enormous energy, and Ember could feel her strength draining rapidly. The iron bolt was still in place, still poisoning his system faster than she could repair the damage. I can't keep this up much longer, she gasped. Then don't. Kai's hand closed over hers, his grip weak but determined. His eyes were open again, focused on her face with desperate intensity. Let me go, Ember. Use your power to stop Morgana instead. No. I'm not losing you. You're killing yourself trying to save me. I can feel it, the magic is consuming your life force. He was right. The healing energy was drawing on her own vitality, burning through years of her life with every second that passed. But she didn't care. I said no. Stubborn woman, he said with something that might have been a smile. I love you. Then live. That's an order. But even as she poured more power into the healing, Ember knew it wasn't enough. The iron bolt had to come out, and when it did, he would bleed to death before her magic could compensate. Unless someone else could help. Damon, she called out mentally. Can you reach the stables from here? Through the blood bond? Barely. Why? I need you to break free. Now. Whatever it takes. Ember, I'm still cursed. Even if I could get out of the stall. You're his brother. You share blood, genetics, magical resonance. If I can channel healing energy through both of you at the same time. Understanding flooded Damon's mental voice. It might work. But I'll have to break the curse myself, and without proper preparation, the magical backlash could kill me. Better than watching Kai die because I'm not strong enough to save him alone. Agreed. Give me 2 minutes. Around them, the battle was reaching its climax. Lydia had gained the upper hand, but Morgana was preparing some kind of desperate final spell. Dark energy swirled around the witch like a living thing, and the temperature in the chamber was dropping rapidly. Whatever you're planning, you'd better do it quickly, Lydia called out between sword strikes. She's about to bring the whole mountain down on our heads. 1 minute, Damon reported. I can feel the curse starting to crack. But 1 minute might be too long. Kai's breathing was growing more labored, and despite her healing efforts, blood was beginning to foam at the corners of his mouth. Ember, he whispered. If I don't make it. You're going to make it. If I don't, I need you to know. The research, the investigation, it wasn't about controlling you. It was about protecting you from this. He gestured weakly toward Morgana. I suspected she was more dangerous than she appeared, and when I realized what you were, I was terrified she'd try to use you. Kai. I should have told you. I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry. Now. Damon's voice exploded in her mind. I'm free. Ember felt at the moment the transformation curse shattered, a wave of magical energy that rolled through the manor like an earthquake. Somewhere above them, she knew Damon was resuming his human form for the first time in 5 years. But more importantly, she could suddenly sense him directly, feel his presence like a bright star in her magical awareness. I'm here, his voice said, but now it came from 2 directions, the mental link they'd always shared, and from his physical form racing down the tunnels toward them. Hold on, Ember told Kai. Your brother's coming. The chamber doors burst open again, and Damon Ravencrest entered in human form. He was tall and lean like Kai, with the same steel-gray eyes and dark hair, but where Kai projected controlled power, Damon radiated raw intensity. He wore clothes hastily borrowed from the manor's staff, and his face was marked by 5 years of unimaginable suffering. But he was alive, human, and most importantly, he was Kai's blood kin. Brother, he said, dropping to his knees beside the stone slab. Damon? Kai's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. How? Long story. Right now, we need to save your life. Damon looked at Ember. What do you need me to do? Place your hands on his shoulders. I'm going to channel healing energy through both of us. Your blood connection should amplify the magic. Damon obeyed without question, his hands settling on Kai's shoulders. The moment the connection formed, Ember felt the healing energy flow more freely, more powerfully than before. Now, she said, gripping the iron bolt with both hands. This is going to hurt. She pulled the bolt free in one smooth motion, then immediately flooded the wound with healing lightning. With Damon's help, the magic was strong enough to seal torn blood vessels instantly, to repair damaged organs faster than they could fail. Kai's back arched as the healing energy flowed through him, but his breathing stabilized and color began to return to his cheeks. It's working, Damon said, relief flooding his mental voice. The wound is closing. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. Morgana's final spell reached its crescendo, and the chamber filled with dark energy that felt like ice and decay and the end of all things. If I cannot have the Stormcaller's power, the witch screamed over the magical chaos, then no one will. The mountain began to shake as her death curse took hold, cracking stone and collapsing tunnels. They had minutes, maybe less, before the entire underground complex came down on their heads. We need to get out of here, Lydia shouted, her voice barely audible over the sound of breaking stone. But Kai was still weak from his injuries, barely able to stand even with the healing magic coursing through him. And outside the chamber, the sound of collapsing tunnels suggested their escape route might already be blocked. Stormcaller, Damon's voice was urgent in her mind. Can you clear our path? Ember looked at the crumbling ceiling, felt the mountain's weight pressing down on them, and realized what she had to do. Everyone stay close to me, she called out, raising her hands as power built within her once more. But this time, instead of calling down lightning, she reached up. Up through stone and earth, through the very bones of the mountain itself, calling to the storm clouds that always gathered around the highest peaks. What are you doing? Kai asked, his arm around Damon's shoulders as his brother helped him stand. Bringing the mountain down, Ember said. On my terms instead of hers. Lightning erupted from her fingertips, but instead of striking randomly, it carved through stone with surgical precision. She opened a shaft straight up through the mountain, a tunnel lined with fused rock that wouldn't collapse. Everyone up, she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of elemental forces. Now. Winds swirled around them, lifting them up through the shaft she'd created while the rest of the underground complex collapsed behind them. They rose through solid stone as if flying, carried by a controlled hurricane that deposited them safely on the mountainside above the manor. When the last of them emerged, Ember let the magic fade and collapsed to her knees, completely drained. Below them, the manor still stood intact, but she could feel the massive caverns beneath it settling into rubble. Morgana's ritual chamber, along with Morgana herself, was buried under tons of stone. Is it over? Lydia asked, helping Ember to her feet. It's over, Damon confirmed, his arms still supporting his brother. I can't sense her anymore. She's either dead or so deeply buried it amounts to the same thing. Kai looked at Ember, his expression uncertain. Are we okay? After everything that happened? She studied his face, the guilt, the hope, the love that even betrayal couldn't diminish. They had a lot to work through, conversations to have about trust and honesty and the future. But as she looked at him, alive and whole despite everything, she knew they'd find a way. We're going to be, she said, reaching for his hand. But next time, no more secrets. From either of us. Next time? There's always a next time, Damon observed dryly. That's what makes life interesting. And as the three of them stood on the mountainside, watching the sun rise over Silver Ridge territory, Ember couldn't help but agree. The next time was going to be very interesting indeed. Chapter 6. The healing wasn't working. Ember knelt beside Kai on the mountain ledge, her hands pressed against his chest where the iron bolt had torn through him, and watched helplessly as her Stormcaller magic fought a losing battle against the curse poison spreading through his system. The wound itself had closed under her lightning touch, but something else was killing him, something Morgana had planned for, prepared for, woven into the very iron of the bolt that had struck him down. The metal was cursed, Damon said grimly, his newly human form crouched beside his brother. Through their restored blood bond, he could sense what Ember's magic could not fully heal. She must have prepared it specifically for this moment, knowing that ordinary iron wouldn't be enough to stop our healing. Kai's breathing was shallow and labored, his skin taking on an ashen pallor that spoke of poison working its way toward his heart. Each pulse spread the curse deeper into his system, beyond the reach of conventional healing. There has to be something we can do, Ember said desperately, pouring more power into her attempts to purge the curse. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean with her bare hands. Her magic simply couldn't touch whatever dark sorcery Morgana had woven into that bolt. There is. Lydia's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of knowledge that made everyone turn toward her. But you won't like it. Tell me. The curse can only be countered by its opposite, willing sacrifice instead of selfish ambition. Someone who loves him has to take the poison into themselves and transform it through their own life force. Lydia's expression was grim. It's called soul healing, and it's not something that can be undone. Ember didn't hesitate. How do I do it? Ember, no. Kai's voice was barely a whisper, but his hand closed weakly around her wrist. Don't even think about it. It's not a simple transfer, Lydia continued, ignoring his protest. Soul healing requires entering the spirit realm, facing the source of the curse in the place where all magic originates. Most who attempt it never return. But some do. Some do. Stormcallers especially have a chance, because their power connects them to the fundamental forces of life and death. Lydia met Ember's eyes steadily. But the cost is enormous. Using that much power, touching the spirit realm directly, it will mark you. Every dark force in the supernatural world will sense what you are, what you've done. You'll never be safe again. And there's something else, Damon's voice spoke directly into Ember's mind, his newly restored telepathic abilities reaching out to her. Something Lydia isn't saying. What? Ember responded silently. The curse on me. If you enter the spirit realm now, while I'm free but not fully healed from 5 years of imprisonment, you might be able to break the remaining bonds entirely. But it would mean choosing between saving Kai and freeing me completely. The weight of that revelation hit her like a physical blow. She looked between the two brothers, Kai dying from Morgana's final trap, Damon alive but still bearing the spiritual scars of his long captivity. The curse that had transformed him was broken, but the deeper magic that had bound his soul for 5 years remained. Without proper healing, those bonds would eventually drag him back into the animal form, and this time the transformation would be permanent. She could save one of them completely, but not both. What aren't you telling me? She asked Lydia aloud. The beta exchanged a look with Damon, some silent communication passing between them. Then Lydia sighed. The spirit realm requires absolute focus. You'll only have enough power for one major working, either healing Kai completely or severing the last bonds on Damon's soul. Attempting both would likely kill you and save neither of them. So I have to choose. Ember's voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. Between the man I love and his brother. There might be another way, Damon said quietly. But it's dangerous, and it requires trusting Kai completely. What do you mean? Soul healing doesn't have to be done alone. If two people attempt it together, sharing the burden and the risk, they might be able to accomplish more than one person alone. Damon's steel-gray eyes, so like his brother's, fixed on her face. But it requires absolute trust between the participants. One moment of doubt, one instant of fear or hesitation, and both souls are lost forever. Ember looked down at Kai, whose consciousness was fading in and out as the curse poison spread through his system. He's barely conscious. How can he help with soul healing? Because soul healing isn't about the body, Lydia explained. It's about the spirit, the essential core of who someone is. Kai's spirit is strong, even if his body is failing. If you can link with him in the spirit realm, combine your Stormcaller power with his alpha strength. We might be able to save everyone, Ember finished. Or we might doom ourselves and accomplish nothing. Those are the choices, Damon confirmed. Safe but limited healing for one of us, or dangerous joint healing that could save us all. Ember closed her eyes, reaching for the storm within herself. The power was there, vast and untapped, but she could sense the truth in what Lydia had said. Using it fully would change her forever, make her a beacon for every dark force that sought to control or destroy Stormcaller magic. But as she felt Kai's heartbeat growing weaker beneath her hands, she realized the choice had already been made. How do I enter the spirit realm? Are you sure about this? Lydia asked. Once you cross over, there's no guarantee you'll be able to return. I'm sure. Ember looked at Damon. Can you anchor me? Keep some kind of connection to the physical world? I can try. Our telepathic link should hold across the barrier between realms, at least for a while. Damon moved to sit cross-legged behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. But Ember, if something goes wrong. If something goes wrong, at least I'll have tried. She looked down at Kai one more time, memorizing his face. And if I don't try, he dies anyway. What do you need me to do? Damon asked. Just keep talking to me. Keep reminding me who I am and why I'm doing this. Ember placed her hands flat on Kai's chest, directly over his heart. And if I ask you to pull me back, don't hesitate. Understood. Ember took a deep breath and let herself fall into the storm. The transition was like stepping through a waterfall of lightning. One moment she was kneeling on the rocky mountain ledge, surrounded by the familiar weight of physical reality. The next, she was standing in a realm of swirling mists and impossible colors, where the rules of physics held no meaning and power flowed like visible rivers through the air. The spirit realm. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a place where thoughts took physical form and emotions painted the sky in shifting hues. In the distance, she could see the towering spires of what looked like a great city, its buildings constructed from crystallized music and walls of solidified time. But she wasn't here for sightseeing. Can you hear me? Damon's voice reached her, fainter than before but still clear. I'm here, she replied. The realm is incredible. Focus on Kai. You should be able to sense his spirit somewhere near you. Ember reached out with her magical senses, searching for the familiar warmth of Kai's presence. It took several moments, but eventually she found him, a dim spark of silver light off to her left, flickering like a candle in the wind. She followed the light through the swirling mists, her footsteps silent on ground that felt like solidified starlight. The closer she got to Kai's spirit, the more she could sense the curse poison eating away at him, a spreading stain of black energy that pulsed with Morgana's malevolent will. But there was something else nearby, another presence that made her Stormcaller abilities sing with recognition. Hello, daughter.